Welcome to NACD Northern California's program on the European climate regulations in the first year of implementation. We have a stellar panel here and have the pleasure of moderating it. And I'd also like to thank Baker Bots for sponsoring this program. So we're here today to benefit from the work of many Europeans in developing, interpreting, and implementing environmental regulations. They're called CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. I am going to very briefly introduce our panelists. You have the bios and LinkedIn profiles in the invitation, so you can find out many more of their accomplishments and expertise on your own time. So I'll start with Beatrice, who is an expert in corporate governance and global trade. She's the Director General, which we might call a CEO in the US, of the European Confederation of Directors Associations, called ECODA, which is really the voice of European Voice of Directors. So I'd say it's analogous to NACD. She also has a degree in law. Sabile is an independent director at IBA, which is a listed, or what we would call a public company for life sciences. And she has degrees in physics and ecological economics. I'll introduce Sandra, who is an independent director of several public companies, including energy companies. And she's also got a background in entrepreneurship as a professor of law and governance, and her degrees are in law, accounting, and management. And Kohn is currently the board chair of KBC Group and a board member of Umicore, which is a large materials company and makes sustainable materials. And it'll be really the Umicore side that Kohn will be speaking with the most. He's a professor of economics and technology and innovation management at KU Leuven. And we had another panelist, Stanny, and we aren't sure how soon he'll be able to join the call. So we'll add him if he's able to make it. So to set the stage, we want to do two things. One is to agree on what definition of sustainability we'll be using during this webinar. We're going to use the UN Grutland Commission definition, which has stood the test of time. It's 38 years old. And that is defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So it's a very long-term perspective of sustainability and a holistic approach that incorporates economic, social, and environmental considerations. So the second scene setting we'd like is to hear a bit more about what the Europeans had in mind when they wrote these regulations, what they wanted to accomplish, and then a very high-level summary of the regs and the context that these other panelists had to work with when they began interpreting and implementing the regs in the last year or two. So Beatrice, how about you get us started?
Thank you very much, Emily, and welcome to everyone. Well, I will try to make it short. So you have to understand that in 2021, the EU proposed the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, we call it the CSRD, to improve our companies' report on sustainability. And this directive reflects the EU ambitions to become carbon neutral by 2050. In fact, the Commission really wanted to position the EU as a global leader in sustainability reporting. And the goals were quite simple. The intention was to increase transparency, comparability, and reliability of information, and not just for investors, but for all stakeholders. And on top of that, the CSRD was also designed as a strategic tool to adapt business models of companies. So, Emily, do you want me to give you a brief overview of the content of this directive?
Yes.
So, in fact, the CSRD rules were adopted in 2022 and begin applying from 2024. So, with the first reports issued in 2025 for the largest companies. And I will be brief, but just for you to understand a little bit the several changes that this directive has brought. So basically, it applies to a very much larger number of companies, included listed and big private companies. It also requires companies to report using what we call the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. And it introduced, I don't know if you are familiar with this concept, but it introduced the double materiality principle. So meaning that companies must report both on how sustainability issues affect them, but also on how they impact people and the planet. Sustainability disclosure are subject to external assurance, moving from limiting assurance to reasonable assurance over time. And what is also important is that the reports must be included in the management report, not as a separate document. I will not come into too many details, but just for you to understand that there was a timeline for implementation, and this timeline varies depending on company size. So for instance, starting in 2028, non-EU companies were supposed to report depending on their size. And we were speaking about 3,000 US companies, for you to know. And these companies, as I said, must report according to ESRS standards, which differ completely from the TCFD in several ways. In fact, they require disclosure on climate, as well as broader ESG matters, and they are multi-stakeholders focused, not just investors focused. And again, they follow the double materiality principle, so both inside out and outside in perspectives. And reporting is mandatory, and both risk and opportunities related to climate must be disclosed. I think we are going to speak about the first reports that have been issued by the biggest companies. I will not come into that details, but just for you to know and to give you the full picture, you should be aware that we are now facing significant changes with what we call the so-called omnibus regulation.
We'll talk about that later.
Yes, but just to mention that we are in the process of simplification, but as you said, we are going to speak about it a bit later. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Emily.
Fantastic context and what an aspirational goals for Europe to really lead the way. So what we'd like to do is hear now from our panelists of their experiences with their different companies, life science, energy, materials, what it was like to do that implementation, hear their stories, and then we will circle back after that to hear more about what now, what did they learn, what did the country learn, what are others thinking about this, and then we'll get into some of the more general governance principles for sustainability. So Sabile, can you get us started and talk about some of the significant challenges your life science board had in this first year of reporting and how the board fit into the whole process?
Yes, hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I should say that actually with the first year of implementing the CSRD, we didn't consider it as a big challenge for IBA. And I will explain why. First of all, because at IBA, we started our sustainability journey formally 15 years ago, 15. And if you look at informally, at least on the social and human aspect, sustainability was there since the creation of the company 40 years ago. But let's say that formally looking at environment and social and economic together, that's, let's say, 15 years ago. So we were ready, we were getting ready, we knew that CSRD was coming, and to do our sustainability journey, we were already measuring and reporting internally on all different dimensions of sustainability that are relevant for our company and for what we're trying to do. So in that sense, there was no big challenge. there was something that we did, and I brought it to the board back in last October, is that we thought, okay, now we have to report under this format. And what we want to make sure is make the best use of this obligation, which we actually did. We'll say, okay, we'll use the CSRD also as an internal tool to really look at the whole value chain of IBA. And so make it a very useful tool also internally. So I think, I mean, it shows that if the spirit of the law is good, and if the structure of the law is applicable, you can really get a nice tool out of it. It's not perfect, but we are trying to make the best out of it.
Thank you. Sandra, how about you? What was your experience with the year one of implementing these regs?
Thank you, Emily, and also for me, very happy to be here. Very happy to meet, or not to meet directly, but indirectly, all the American colleagues. So really, very nice experience. I'm speaking not only for my own boards, but also based on the insights I gathered within our National Directors Organization in Belgium, and also within the Sustainability Awards jury that I am chairing in Belgium. And so I think there's two kind of experiences I have to share, some positive ones and some more negative ones, some attention points. So first, the positive ones, I think, with the first year of reporting is that it did place it on the agenda of boards. As Sibyl said, some companies went some way already and were already making the best of it, but not all of them did. So it put it on the agenda of a board, and it put it on the agenda more regularly and more extensively. So in a more structured way than before. So that's certainly a good point. It also helped to mobilize the whole company, so to integrate it into all decision-making levels within the company, and so not limited to what we sometimes see in companies, the sustainability champions, but to make it really holistic throughout the company. Also, what we heard from the stakeholders is that CSRD was in fact, or is in fact, a very good directive. It is well drafted. It is easy to understand, and it addresses the right ESG topics. It goes much too into detail. That's why Beatrice was talking about simplification. But the basis is really good, and that's also the reason, I think, Sibyl, you agree with me, that you can use it as a tool, as a compass on your sustainability journey. The mandatory audit, Beatrice referred to it, the assurance of the reporting brought credibility, and also brought it on the table of the audit committee, so helped to professionalize the process, which was also very good. And at last, I think it helps to combat greenwashing, because of course, it helps to reduce unfounded sustainability promises, which are not good for healthy competition on the market. But also some negative points. It does not immediately help to understand the link between non-financial accounting and the viability of the business model. So for too many companies, those are still two separate things, and they are doing sustainability reporting on the one hand, and they are working on their strategy on the other hand. And so that is not the objective. It really has to be integrated. We'll come back to that. So this non-financial accounting today is not integrated in the financial statements of the company. So that's also something, except of course for carbon pricing, something we still have to work on also in Europe. And then a third point, CSRD, as I said, is well written, but the educational point was missing. So the part in the structure to help companies and their boards to understand the link between the non-financial and the financial reasonings, and to really look at the impact of ESG on the viability of the business model in 10, 20, or 30 years. And then the fourth problem, I think, in general for Europe, is the lack of global approach of the EU Commission, and the fact that it did not take into account that there are important differences between geographic areas, which of course leads to differences in competitiveness. So a lot of positive points from the field, but also some attention points for the future. And so in sharing them with you, you might be able to avoid them in the United States.
Wonderful, thank you. And welcome, Stanny. I'll introduce you in a moment. I want to ask Koen the next question, which is, what were some of your key insights, from this first year of implementation at Umicore?
Yep. Well, I do think that, as Sandra just mentioned and other colleagues mentioned as well, it is an approach, definitely CSRD, that helps us to focus in a very sharp and structured manner on ESG-related topics. Of course, we have to look into the full picture, and this means that in 2022, Europe started with the EU taxonomy, and the EU taxonomy defines eligible activities for CSRD. Then as of 2024, CSRD became in force, and 2027, there may be CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which is something still up in the air and where there are quite some questions as to how to apply this if it would come into being. This means that if you look at this full picture, for instance, if I take the perspective of Umicore, the EU taxonomy will still need some updating because there are some activities. We are, for instance, big in precious metals refining, and precious metals refining does not qualify as an eligible taxonomy activity. So this means that for us, it's a bit difficult to have everything reported. We do report on PMR, on precious metals refining, but it's still not recognized within the taxonomy, which means that there is still some way to go on that front. On the other hand, what it helped us to do is to clarify and structure our governance, including board involvement with a sustainability committee on the one hand, on the other hand, a very regular presence of sustainability, but also health and safety in general, so ESG topics at board level, because it's not just about E, it's also about S and about G. A very important element the first year for us was data quality, data ambiguity, interpretation of indicators, making sure that everyone is on the same page. We have 144 companies within the group. Those companies are present in China, in South Korea, in the US, in Europe. So this means that and that's also part of the educational dimension, but if you roll it out, you have to be sure that the data capture, the data monitoring, the data quality, and the data alignment is up to date. And that's something that took quite some effort. We installed special software to do so, customized software to do so. So going forward, this will definitely be an area of attention to improve on that side. A third dimension that it helped us with was entering ESG into all the dimensions of risk management, because CSRD really make sure that you look into the different implications of, for instance, emissions, etc. And this directly links to your risk management approach, and via risk management approach, it also directly links to your strategy. So because we have this link between risk, strategy setting, etc. And a last item I would like to mention now is that it also focuses and asks you to focus on everything related to third-party engagement. How do you make sure that your third-party engagements are compliant with your CSRD requirements? And that's an important element. And this is also where the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive may have an impact, and which may make it very complex at one point in time, because that will mean that you need those quality assurances from your third parties all over the globe. which will be difficult for you to monitor. So that's a caveat that I want to bring. A last item I want to mention is that our experience is that as a large company, you have the professionalism, you know about the systems, you can invest in the systems to make it up and running and to have your preliminary audits, etc., according to plan. But of course, we also in Europe have large SME populations, and that's where the omnibus and the simplification will be extremely important, because for some of those SMEs, typically companies turnover 500 million, 700 million, may have difficulties in getting it up and running in the same structured approach as we have. But those are some of our learnings. Those are some of the strong points, but also some of the points of attention going forward, and making it still more coherent. And definitely, as far as we are concerned, the scope of the taxonomy is also an important element.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Sandra, Sabile, and Koen responded from a board point of view and the companies on which they serve. And Stanny is here now. Stanny is the Director of Sustainability and Corporate Affairs at Wholesome, which is a large building construction products company. So his degrees are in both communications and law. And so I think, I'd love to hear from you, Stanny, about what it was like for you and your team to actually do the work, day in and day out to, get things reported for 2024.
Holcim, as a building company, global building company, is a Swiss company, so it's not obliged to follow the CSRD until 2027. But we're already doing it, and we are already doing it for years, because we are reporting on environmental topics, on sustainability topics already for quite some years. And why are we doing that? Because we need it. We have put sustainable construction in the focus of our business strategy. So we have clear targets, objectives, KPIs on sustainable construction. And if you want to have this debate, this discussion with your clients, with your stakeholders, with policymakers, but also with shareholders, you need to do reporting on all these topics. It's a necessary reporting. It's time consuming. It's an enormous effort, but it's necessary. What we found by doing this exercise already for 2024 and now for 2025 is that CSRD will be even more difficult because you have to do a reporting cross-functional, and it needs a lot of coordination. Cost is also a challenge. The number of FTEs that are needed to do all this reporting and to set up these mechanisms is quite high. So that's an issue. Cost is also an issue in another sense. We found that it's new regulation, so everybody's looking what is the right interpretation of all the aspects. So there's a lot of discussion between companies that need to report, policymakers, stakeholders, but also consultants. So also the cost for consultants is increased. And yeah, there's with the CSRD, there will be new data points. We have to adapt. We needed to adapt our reporting mechanisms or software or reporting platforms to compile all these data points from all our national operations in the different countries. So that was also a challenge.
Great, thank you. So let's see. So Beatrice, we have heard from the panelists both some of the positives and the challenges of the regulations, because we know as directors, we always need to be listening for dissenting views and understand what their points are and how we might address them. So, again, briefly, of course, what you mentioned some of these before, but what might happen from here, right, to improve these regulations or change them as political climates change, and what does that mean for directors and executives implementing these in the future?
So basically, as I mentioned very briefly, the Commission issued what we call the Omnibus Regulation, which aims to simplify the CSRD. And I have to say that this proposal came to a certain point as a surprise and creates some legal uncertainty for companies and board members. In fact, for you to understand, the Omnibus Regulation could potentially exempt up to 80% of companies from reporting. So the proposal is on the table right now, but the legislative process will take time. And we are still a long way from a final decision. The timeline points to October, but let's be honest, that may be quite unrealistic. Because we have fringe institutions at the EU and they are not truly aligned. For instance, some members of the European Parliament are saying that the omnibus proposal may end up penalizing front runners, companies that have already invested heavily in sustainability. And even now, we are hearing companies saying that they are not asking for deregulation, but rather for smart and stable frameworks they can trust and build upon. So many feel the proposal was a bit rushed, that the Commission didn't really take the time to collect the right data, to learn from the lessons that could be taken from the first reports. But meanwhile, in the EU, the financial markets are already moving ahead faster than the legislation. So even if the EU regulation slows down, the market, we believe, will continue pushing forward. And we have heard from our members, the board members, that they are willing to pursue their efforts, even on a voluntary approach.
Right, thank you. Sandra, would you add anything to these comments from a board point of view and how you prepare for potential changes?
Yes, I think Beatrice has been already quite complete. I think what we noticed is that the companies that have been reporting under wave 1 have been doing this quite seriously. They invested hugely in resources. So they will not draw back immediately. And I think there's also, as Beatrice said, a demand from the market. What we see in the sustainability report, of course, is that the level of details differs from company to company. So we go from reports of 40 pages to reports of 200 pages. So there's still some work to do to get it all integrated. There is a second tendency that we noticed is there is still a tendency to focus on negative impacts and not on opportunities. So there is also still some work to do. So the advice we are giving, I think also with Ekota and Beatrice to the companies, is to keep up the work and to use the delay given by the Commission, so the two years delay with the Stop the Clock Directive, to move from the tedious reporting burden to using CSRD as a real tool to transition your business model. So I think that's the most important message to share with companies regarding the preparation of the regulation, the changes in regulation. Don't take a step back, but use it to take a step forward and to move beyond compliance, really to strategic integration.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So what we'd like to do is switch from this conversation about what was learned sort of every day in this implementation stage, and now to go up a level to think about what does it mean for boards? How do companies approach sustainability? How is sustainability integrated into governance? So Sabile, I'd like to start with you, right? How can boards address the challenge of sustainability and align that with the long-term business strategy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, I'd like to start from the why. Why should we as businesses and boards act? And I think from my personal point of view, we are confronted with three imperatives in relationship to sustainability. There is a moral imperative that comes with what we are doing to our life support system and our societies. There is a survival and thrive imperative, which when you look at the science, and I'm an environmental scientist, you see what the problems are and how the very survival, at least of our own species, is under pressure. And then there is a business imperative, which is if you want to thrive as a business in this kind of context, there's a business imperative to transform towards a more sustainable business model. So this is the why. And, you know, at IBA, we do particle accelerators. We are a lot of scientists in this company. We start from the science, we look at what it tells us, and then we act. Now, on the how, which is more of your question, what we do, we try to integrate sustainability really in the work of the board. So what happened? I was hired as a board member because I'm an environmental and sustainability scientist. So the chairman of the board really wanted to have someone on the board with expertise in this field. Then we set up a sustainability committee, just as in Umicore, we heard. But after a while, we thought, the sustainability committee, it's so important that every board member should be on the committee. So we transformed the sustainability committee into a full board sustainability, which means that once a year we have a full board only talking about sustainability, but we also discuss sustainability at every board meeting because it is completely integrated in the strategic discussions of the company. So we did decide, the management looked at which tools would help them. And one of the tools that we have decided to use and that helps us a lot is B Corp. Maybe you in the US, you're aware of B Corp. If you're not, you can look at the B Corp model or reach out to me and I can talk to you about it. But B Corp really helps us to design our strategy, but also to look 360 degrees at where we stand, because really sustainability is not just about the environment, and the environment is not just about the climate, and the climate is not just about CO2, and CO2 is not just about energy. Remember, we have this reduction. No, sustainability is the social, it's environmental, and of course you have to be economically sustainable, otherwise there's no business, so there's no problem. And then practical things we did, when you want to be a certified B Corp, you have to change your bylaws, which we did. And so it's like you become a for-purpose company in the way you change your bylaws. So now as an independent board member, I can refer to the bylaws that explicitly say that the board is supposed to govern the company, taking into account all the different stakeholders, and they're cited in the bylaws. So that's, of course, shareholders and employees and clients, and for us behind the clients, the patients, because we do cancer treatment with our machines, but also environment and community at large. And community at large in the B Corp model includes the supply chain. So there is that also, changing the bylaws of the company. And to give you another example, one of the things we did, we are, if you're B Corp, you're scored, so you have a certain score, and we have a target of improving when we recertify every 3 years for B Corp. And the bonus of our top 100 managers, a third of their bonus is linked to our sustainability performance, to our B Corp score improvement. So these are the kind of things we're trying to do, and this is managed at the board level in very close cooperation with the management team.
Yeah, thank you. There's a lot for us to learn there. So let's see, Cohen, what do you feel is critical for companies to move forward when they think about their approach for sustainability?
Yeah. Well, I think what I'm going to refer again to what we have learned over the last many years, because Umicore was born a sustainable company. Sustainability and circularity have always been high on our agenda, given the fact that we combine materials production and recycling in order to close the loop in that area. And this means that both impact on business, impact on society, but also impact on talent. We are a company that recruits a lot of talent every year. And when you do not have this sustainability purpose clear and explicit, you will find out quite quickly that the talent base you are looking for is not really interested in your organization as well. And you need that talent for future innovation and future performance. So that adding to what was just mentioned, now at Umicore, we have a number of areas that we cover at board level. First of all, sustainability, ESG, is a standard item in each board meeting. So all board members are involved. But given the fact that sustainability also is something that is quite technical when it comes to, for instance, tooling, when it comes to deciding on what types of indicators, how you standardize them across your business, etc. That's why we also created a sustainability committee. So a number of board colleagues are member of that sustainability committee, together with our sustainability group or sustainability office within the company. But we also installed joint meetings between the audit committee and the sustainability committee in order to link, on the one hand, the non-financials and on the other hand, the financials, because as was just mentioned, of course, we need economic performance. Financial markets expect us to live up to economic performance expectations. So this means that you have to manage that balance very carefully. And it's an equilibrium that you have to find out. CSRD helps in finding that equilibrium, but the market wants to see you are sustainable and you're moving towards greater sustainability. And for us, this means that it's not just about emissions, it's also about water, it's also about biodiversity, given the type of company we are. And on the other hand, how do you maintain a performance that is attractive to your shareholders and your investors? And that's why we have this kind of trilogue board, audit committee, sustainability committee that act in a quite interwoven manner. Another important element is our remuneration committee, nomination and remuneration committee, because sustainability indicators, objectives, a number of core indicators are part of the variable remuneration of our executive leadership team and our senior management. For our executive leadership team, in the short-term variable remuneration, 1/3, 30% to be exact, is linked to sustainability objectives. In the long-term variable remuneration, 50% is linked to indicators related to ESG, related to the 3 dimensions of ESG. So this means that there is a very individualized incentive as well that is closely monitored, and that is also not just monitored on a collective basis, but there is an individual adjustment that can be done based on everyone's performance on those fronts. And then finally, because we also have individual parameters, and then finally, we pay a lot of attention to training because of the fact that if you really want to become a sustainable organization, it's not just the board that needs to be aware. It's not just the tooling and the data issues, etc., that need to be introduced, but it's also the training, the awareness, the understanding of all your colleagues throughout the organization. We have over 11,000 colleagues at Umicore. So this means that they all have to be not only trained, but they also have to understand where we are moving, because they are principal agents in making it happen. Because when we talk data quality, data collection, etc., then they have an important role to play there. And that's essentially a number of pillars on which we build company-wide our sustainability policy going forward.
Terrific. Thank you. So, Stanny, I want to, with your communications expertise, I'd like to hear more about both, how you communicate to people with different points of view about sustainability than maybe what Holcim has, but then also how do you communicate about your sustainability initiatives to the stakeholders that you have? What works, what doesn't work?
Yeah, it's also their communication, because collecting all the data and drafting the report is an enormous effort. But then afterwards, disseminating the information to the right audiences is also an enormous effort. And there's no one silver bullet or one solution that you can use for that. You're going to have to use different channels, different formats, and adapting all your formats to the audience you want to target, because you want to have the discussion with your shareholders, with colleagues within the company, with the stakeholders, and NGOs and other organizations, but also with local policymakers. So each have their different needs and need to be addressed differently. Within Holcim, everything starts with the business strategy. We have the next gen strategy that has been communicated a couple of weeks ago. And next to that tool, we have annually the integrated report, where there's a financial part, but also the non-financial report. So this is the precursor of the CSRD reporting. And that's the main source of all information. So everybody needs to go and look for the information there and use it in these different formats and in these different channels. It's all about explaining, because it's quite complex. You have to explain methodology, you have to give context for data, and so on. So often communication is also educating your counterparts, and you have to do that internally with colleagues, so that they're empowered, and that they also have the right communication tools to tell this story, because that's important, that everybody tells the same story. And otherwise, it's a lot of repetition. It's you cannot send out in our case the non-financial part of the report is over 200 pages. You cannot send out this one document and hope that everybody will read it. So you have to cut it up in little pieces on your LinkedIn post, on your all the social media, newsletters, website, one-to-one discussion and outreach programs. So you have to really cut it up in small pieces, and then always coming back with key messages and key data. There's a challenge in that, because everything what we want to say about sustainability needs to be aligned with our objectives, needs to be aligned with our SBI approved objectives and so on. So everything needs to be backed up also with data and evidence. So that's a challenge that we encourage everybody to communicate about sustainability and all topics of sustainability within the company. But we also want to give them the tools that they do it in an evidence-based manner, so that we are not under risk of public scrutiny for greenwashing.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. I think we just got a master class in communications. So Sandra, what are some board level practices that have successfully embedded sustainability into the DNA of corporate governance that you've seen? Are there models that US directors might adapt or use?
I would like to share, if you allow me, Emily, my experience on the Fluxys board, more than theoretical models, because it's a very special experience, I think, because Fluxys not only it's an energy infrastructure company, it's also a public company, not in the sense of a listed company, but in the sense that the Belgian municipalities are the reference shareholders. So we are a listed company, so we are operating on a commercial market, but our reference shareholder are public authorities. So we are also using public money. So we have a special role to play. And so I entered the Fluxys board in 2018, and you can imagine that the world has changed since 2018. And so in 2018, we really tackled it from the strategic viewpoint. So we started with strategic sessions, and why? Because very evident, because the role of natural gas in the energy mix is clearly declining, or was clearly declining at the time. So we really started, on the one hand, we started at board level. And then, as Koen said, it was a question of creating awareness at board level, but also creating awareness with management, getting the right expertise. And how did we do that? We started to organize expert sessions. So not as they did at IBA, where they got Sibyl on board, but there's only one Sibyl in Belgium, so we couldn't get her on board anymore. So we had to work at the whole board level. So we started to organize expert sessions at board level. So really very technical expert sessions every 2 months at some period, to get the expertise of all the board members at the same level. Of course, we also got sustainability champions at the operational level. And then we integrated it in the committees, so to make sure it was which was also evident at Fluxys, because it was a major risk for us. It was a very important risk, but also an opportunity. And finally, we worked at it. We prepared the sessions with the strategic committee, but finally we abolished, and we did as they did at IBA. We abolished the strategic committee, and we brought the whole strategic discussion to all the board meetings. So we really did a long journey. And if you compare the annual report of 2018, you will see that Fluxys at the time was described. We also worked the purpose as an independent gas infrastructure company. So that was the purpose of Fluxys at the time. And today, the purpose is that we are co-shaping a sustainable energy future. So we have gone a long journey, but as I said, the world has changed. The long term is not the only importance anymore, because there is no long term without the short term. And as a public company, we are also responsible to contribute to the energy security in Northwest Europe. So we had to adjust a little bit our investment plan. We have an investment plan. We have defined an indicative investment plan of 8 billion euros between 2025 and 2034. We had to adjust it slightly because we saw that the hydrogen market didn't pick up as we expected. On the other hand, CO2 capture went more rapidly than we expected, so we have to adjust permanently. And so this is like a permanent board exercise. It is on the agenda of every board meeting, and we are still having all our expert sessions to keep the whole board up to date with the new technology that is developed. So CSRD came on top of that, and as Sibyl said, we also used it as a tool to see that we were going in the right direction, and to bring all the external ESG elements together with our transition of our strategy. So that is what we have seen at Fluxys. And in general, there are different models. There is no one magic solution, but the importance is that it is really tackled as a strategic topic at board level.
Oh, great. Thank you. I want to try to squeeze one more question in before I ask each of you to give your final sort of 30-second summary of a key takeaway. And that's initially to Koen, and then if time with Sibyl to weigh in on it too. Since we're Northern California, we care a lot about tech, and both of you have strong innovation and tech backgrounds. So, you know, there is always this concern that are we giving up competitiveness or innovation, you know, as we spend more time on sustainability. So how do you integrate those together? What are your observations about how can you do both or all? So Koen, I'll start with you and then go to Sibyl.
I do think I didn't mention it before, but I do think that also at board level, but throughout the company, and what Sandra's just mentioned was illustrative of that challenge, is that we also need to understand what I would call the techno-economic dynamics of sustainability policies, both at the level of the company, but also our company, for instance, Umicore, is also active in a lot of European networks. You really have to understand where certain technologies are going and where they are not going. And that means, for instance, what was just mentioned on hydrogen, this is something that we could have imagined a bit earlier at European level if we just had taken into account plain thermodynamics, because that explains everything. If you want to produce green hydrogen, you need 3 kilowatt-hour of energy for every kilowatt-hour of green hydrogen that you will produce. And if you electrify a continent, which is happening in Europe, you already are in short supply of electricity for basic needs like mobility and heating. Heating in the housing market, which means that you come at odds from a techno-economic perspective. So that's something that I think is extremely important from an innovation perspective to be injected into the discussions going forward. And of course, the elephant in the room today is 2 letters named AI. How is the evolution? And that's where the Bay Area definitely has some advantages on Europe, compared to Europe, where you will use AI increasingly to have more decentralized, flexible grid infrastructures, storage infrastructures that need to match supply and demand, which is also important for your company, because as your company is electrifying, for instance, because of the innovation trajectories that we are following, this also means that supply and demand of electricity for your company will become extremely important. So this leads to the fact that from a techno-economic perspective, we need to understand the dynamics in terms of cost structures and performance. And we also need to understand scalability of the different technologies, because when I look, for instance, into an emerging field, we are also looking into, as a company, direct air capture. You see that is still a very early emerging technology, which means that here your board should also understand the limits as of today, and when can you expect sufficient performance when looking into those technologies. And this may still take 5 years, this may still take 7 years, etc. So you have to think in scenarios as well, as far as the techno-economic dimension is concerned.
Great. Well, thank you. Sabine.
Yeah, just quickly, I would like to say that for us, well, IBA is really a company that is building its whole purpose on innovation with, as I said, particle accelerators as the heart of our products. And when we realized that we were not so good on our environmental impact and the environmental impact of our products, we decided to train all our R&D engineers and physicists to eco-design. But you know, you don't find this off the shelf, how to eco-design a cyclotron. It's not something as easy to find in terms of... And so now today, all our staff in R&D is trained into eco-design, but that in the end benefits our clients, and our clients are looking for it because eco-design allows us to look at the whole life cycle of the machines and follow them until the end of life of the machine. We try to make machines that are that we can dismantle well at the end of their life, but also way before its end of life, that we can upgrade and you know, use as much as possible of an upgrade model as possible. So that this to say that innovation is really boosted by the sustainability approach, and it's good for the sustainability, but it's also good for business. I am sitting here today at one of our clients' place, and he's so, the CEO of this company here is so happy because our machines are the best in terms of energy consumption that you can find on the market. And this was all came from the eco-design. One last thing on AI. we do, I could talk forever, but we do use AI to do predictive maintenance of our machines. You know, when you have a whole lineup of patients to be treated in proton therapy on the cyclotron, and the cyclotron goes down, it's a big problem because patients have their treatment planned and they cannot, you know, just say, come back tomorrow. So we use AI a lot to follow our machines all over the world and make sure we can do predictive maintenance, but also it allows us to fly less engineers around the world to repair the machines, because AI can really help us solve problems at a distance. So that's also very interesting.
That's right. Another eco advantage. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. This has been fantastic. So I would like each of you to, if you could recommend one quick, actionable step or a question a director could ask at the next board meeting, and how can our directors be better prepared for this global sustainability governance? So Beatrice, do you want to start? We'll just quickly go around.
Yes, a very quick recommendation. Just I would recommend that all board members read the sustainability statements from first wave companies in the same sector and conduct a gap analysis. They should really ensure that double materiality is integrated into the risk management process.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Sandra.
Very briefly, I would refer them to the 5 recommendations in the EY Long-Term Value and Corporate Governance Survey report of May 2025. The 5th is technology. We talked about it. It's alignment, accountability. Stop thinking sustainability is someone else's job. Understanding, we talked about it. And finance, I don't think we talked a lot about it, but it's another very important aspect. Yes. So I think that's a very good summary they did.
Thank you. Stanny.
Maybe the question, how we're going to embrace this new regulation or this reporting duty, and to how we're going to transform it from red tape, from just reporting for reporting reasons, to a risk management tool or decision-making tool, because you need this data to make right business decisions and integrate sustainability in your business strategy, because it's the only winning strategy.
Right. Thank you. Con.
I will repeat one of my last remarks. How can you scale it? I think that's an important question. How can you scale it across the organization, both in terms of data, in terms of outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. And there is one remark that I would like to give. I also told this in our boards. Let's stop talking of carbon-free, because we will always need carbon. The pharmaceutical industry, the life science industry, the chemical industry will always need carbon. It's part of life. Let's talk fossil-free, because that's what we are really aiming for.
All right. Thank you. Okay, Sabile.
Yeah, well, my advice to any board member is, you know, sustainability is heavily under attack in all corners of the world, not just in your beautiful country, unfortunately, but also here in Europe and other parts. So as board members, we have a responsibility. So take your responsibility there and act to help transform your business towards a sustainable future. So that's my advice.
Right. Well, thank you. And thank you all for such a great panel and for speaking with so much wisdom and speaking English maybe faster than you've ever been asked to speak English before. So it was really terrific. Now, and I'll remind you, there'll be a summary sent out to all attendees. I'd like to give a shout out to Sandra, who helped set up this panel. So thank you, Sandra. And to thank Northern California NACD for bringing us together for this important discussion.